You know, life has its ups and downs. Turn your pretty face to an ugly frown. Seems that when I fix one thing.
Hello, welcome to The Awakening. I'm your host, Angela Brown. Today's topic for discussion will be domestic violence. Wake up, stand up, and speak out against abuse. For some of you who will be watching this, if you have a child that you think could be harmed by this, please have him or her leave the room. It's going to be kind of graphic, and we're going to be talking about, actual stages of abuse. So I hope you like the show as well as I'm going to like doing it. My guest today is Charlene Davis. And we're going to say hello. You want to shake my hand?
Hello. Hello, Ms. Brown. Thank
please,
you.
Angie. Please, Angie.
Okay.
So you have written a book.
Yes.
Pay attention to the flag. Doesn't that mean look out for warnings?
Yes. I wrote the book, Pay Attention to the Red Flags, because I found that there were a lot of women that were in abusive relationships, and I found that the actual signs of abuse were there. So my book is targeting women that can't seem to identify abusive men early. So the goal is to enhance their self-esteem in order for them to develop healthy relationships with men that are committed, loving, caring, and compassionate.
But I have found out no matter what kind of a guy you meet, and he's loving and kind and so forth when he's with you, but when you get married, things could change. But in turn, we need to change before we can expect changes in him.
And I agree with that, and I think what happens is a lot of times women suffer from low self-esteem.
That's number one.
That's the number one reason I think is why people put up with abusive relationships. They see the signs, but for some reason they push those red flags down. So if we would love ourselves more, if we would appreciate ourselves more, if we would expect more from a good, healthy relationship, I do believe we will get out of an abusive relationship.
Do you know what's going to make us get out of an abusive relationship, not to get into one? Our brain only sees what our heart wants to feel. You've got to start thinking with your heart instead of your brain. And don't you believe a woman should have her own job? If she has her own money and she can take care of herself, that's the quickest way not to get involved.
And I agree with that. What I found is that a lot of times some of the women that I interviewed when I was doing my book, their husband may make more money than they do.
But they work.
And some of them, but they work, but they can't make enough to take care of themselves. And I'm a firm believer that it's nice to have someone to pay your bills, and it's nice to have someone to buy all the groceries, but at the end of the day, it's important to be able to provide for yourself in the event that something happens, like being abused. For some reason, we get tied up as women in relationships for years, and we feel like, why should I lose my home? Why should I leave? Even though he's beating me, he's paying the bills. I think that's really a lame excuse for just not loving yourself.
Because if you were secure, like you said, you wouldn't stay and take that abuse. Because I've been in and out of it myself, in and out of abuse. It's like, I know I don't like it, but there's still that inner hope that I hope this will be different.
Yes, I agree. I interviewed several women that told me that, they love their husbands or their boyfriends, and they felt that if he didn't beat them, that he didn't love them. So I think it becomes a pattern. I think it becomes to a point where people become complacent and believe that this is a way of life. And a lot of times it's because they saw it in their own family when they were children, where dad was beating mom, and they thought that was a way of living.
Well, I've come across some things lately I've learned. A guy beats a woman, and we keep wondering, why does he do that? Why does he do that? And I think it has a whole lot to do with watching daddy beat mommy, and mommy won't call for help. So he has the right to do the same thing.
And what I found, Angela, is that a lot of women at work, on jobs I've come in contact with, are really in abusive relationships, and they're not even telling anybody. And I think one of the reasons they stay is, like I said, is because they really don't want to, be alone, can't pay the bills, and very afraid of letting anybody know that they are in an abusive relationship. But I think women need to speak out.
They got to wake up first and realize, I don't deserve this.
That's right, and it starts back to loving yourself first. I believe that there's no way that anybody can have a healthy relationship if they don't love themselves first. There's no way. And women will continue to attract men that are abusive.
Because it's a codependent relationships is what it is. The woman has been in it, he's been in it, so they both go in it and start all over again.
That's right. That's right. And I think you said earlier about how with the children see the family in this abusive environment. And what happens is kids become adults, and then the men really do think that he has a right to just beat on whomever because he watched dad beat mom, and mom did nothing about it. I think that was a very good point that you made.
Yeah, because we're raising potential abuses right now in our own home.
That's right.
When we don't stand up for ourselves.
That's right.
As I just said to you a while ago, I would rather have a black eye than be put down in front of the children. A black eye goes away, you don't see that. But inside you're still dying. You're starving trying to figure out what's wrong with you.
Right, I agree. And I think that a lot of men abuse women because they do suffer from low self-esteem as well. I think that they want to be controlling.
They do.
And they want to be able to tell the world, I am the boss, no matter what. And women got to stand up. And we are trying today is to really reach so many women to let them know that we love them, but they have to love themselves first.
I'm planning on starting a program dealing with battered men because, you know, these men have grown up as children and they have watched. Some of them may not have been battered, but some of them watched and they see the battering that dad does to mom, but yet mom doesn't do anything about it. They need to be retrained.
I agree.
And look at life on the other side. Okay, so my mother took it, but all women may not be my mother. But it's wrong to hit any woman. Right. It's wrong. And it's wrong for a woman to hit a man, too. It goes both ways.
I agree. I agree. And I think what women need to realize, too, I always say, when you're in an abusive relationship, it's always a possibility that the woman will strike out and end up killing the man. Is he worth really going to jail for? And we don't realize that, but it could happen.
Because an anger is rage.
That's right. That's right.
You don't really stop and think you're going to run out with him out a knife. A lot of times women are killed trying to protect themselves.
I agree. I agree. I agree. So we got to do our best as women to love ourselves, appreciate ourselves, get out of the relationships. I always tell women there's always a plan. You never leave home when the man is there, but they need to come up with some kind of plan, whether it's going to a shelter, whether it's going to live with a family member, and we have to share this information with people.
But I have found with a battered woman going to live with a family member, she's putting that family member in charge of being hurt themselves.
Well, that's a good point.
It's very dangerous. You can't go to family. And I think a woman should start trying to save a few dollars here, a few dollars there, and make them a little I call it a little getaway box. In there you put extra clothing for maybe 1 or 2 nights. You hide your few dollars in there, whatever you might need, because at one night she just may need her life, and she can go there and take that box, and she's got a way to get away.
That's a good point.
But you just can't go to a family member, though, because it's too hard. And too many people could be hurt.
You know, and that's a good point, but I think that may be one of the reasons why people don't tell their families about the abuse, because they don't want to put anybody else in jeopardy. So that's a good point.
Also, too, you don't want to tell your family because you don't want your family to think you're that so down. As I've said, you can be beaten so bad you could crawl under a snake's belly and not touch it. That's how low down I felt like that. I don't know. You've never been in it, so you don't know.
Right.
But it's like a loaded gun. You know, do I shoot it or do I put it away? Because my husband put a gun to my head after I went up to Marlboro and put charges against him. He was waiting for me in a dark hall with a gun. Today's the day you die, bitch. That's just what he said.
Isn't that something? You know, I remember one time I was working with a woman and she told me that every night she goes home that her husband puts a gun to her head. She asked me, how do I leave this abusive relationship? And he used to beat her, and he would beat her to a point where he would beat her in areas that nobody could see it.
It's always on the back of the legs, the behind, yeah.
That's absolutely correct. But it's like you said, she even saved money. She was working a part-time job, and I told her, you really need to find yourself another apartment. You need to go to a shelter. And she ended up doing that, and it was really the best thing for her. And I'm saying women need to get out.
Yeah, but it takes a lot of courage to get out.
It really does.
It takes a lot of courage. I went over to Palmer Park a few years back to help a young mom. She called me, and she had a restraining order against this guy that she was living with. And she says they just released him. You know, a restraining order is not worth the paper it's printed on. It's not. You can't keep a man away with a restraining order. But to make a long story short, I went over to help her, to get her, to bring her to my house. And she came to the door, but she was scared. She just I knew something was wrong, but I wasn't smart enough to know. So she opened the door, and as she opened the door, I almost fell in. And he walked up to me and put a gun to my head. He says, well, today I'm going to kill my bitch, I'm going to kill my kid, and I'm going to kill me a white bitch, too. Mm-hmm. Put the gun right to the side of my head, and I just didn't know, well, today's my last day, or today is my last day. And it scared the holy hell out of me. And I can tell you, he walked away. He walked away.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the reasons as well is why people don't even contact the police. I think that's one reason why they feel like they don't have the help they need. But even so, women have to love themselves enough to get out. They have to. They have to muster up the strength to get out. They need to tell somebody about their issue in order for them to be safe, because the abuse is going to continue.
It never stops.
It won't stop.
It never stops. Because when I pressed charges against my husband after my last beating, like I said, I called the police, and he ripped the phone off the wall. But luckily that they had the caller ID then, so they were able to come to my home. But I'm sitting on the kitchen floor bloody, and two big Prince George's County officers walked into my home. What's the score on the Redskins game? The Redskins and the Cowboys were playing that day, November 17th, 1991.
Wow.
And I'm sitting on the floor.
Wow.
And I finally stood up and I walked around to the family room where they were all watching television. And he said, what happened to you? And I said, what do you think happened to me? And he just looked at me and looked at me. And I said, what would you do if somebody had just done this to you? He said, I'd go press charges. And that's the first time I pressed charges, November 17th, 1991.
Wow. But even though you went through the abuse, you did do something about it. And that's what's important.
Close to dying, though, you know?
Right, and I think that's I agree, and I think that's the message we need to get out here today. Yes, it's almost like you have to be almost dead in order to reach out and get help. And what I wrote the book myself, is to reach women before they get to that point. Look at the signs, pay attention to the red flags. The flags go up, but we tend to push them down. And I know that women are aware. They know when men start calling you out your name, that is a sign of abuse. It's verbal abuse. It actually is.
Yes.
But we take it. We tend to think that it's normal, but it's not normal.
No, it's not normal. I have a calendar here I'm going to give you. It's called Awakening Women. And I did this with a box, probably 15 bodybuilders. And on each page, there is a battered woman who I've worked with, who came back from hell to heaven and posed for her face and everything to be seen that she's alive and she's here. So this is going to be for you.
Oh, thank you so much.
And we spent 3 days, well, actually 2.5 days working at a church. They let us have the whole back of it, and we had the bodybuilders there, we had food, everyone went out of their way to help us. But women 75 and 80 years old in that calendar look gorgeous.
Oh, wow, good.
They're free, they're safe, and they're where they should be right now.
Oh, my goodness, good. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, I really want to be able to say again, it is just imperative that we love ourselves. That
we got to like ourselves first.
We have to. We really have to.
We got to like, respect, and then love ourselves.
Right.
I don't care if you're 100 pounds or 500 pounds,
That's
you're
right.
still a beautiful woman.
That's
like
right.
Monique says,
That's right.
I'm a beautiful woman.
That's right.
And you've got to, if there's something you don't like about yourself, change it.
Right, but don't expect anybody else to change it for you.
No, don't hide behind the curtains or anything like that. You know, this is me. This is what I look like, you know? Right.
And I think that, you know, I wrote a little bit in my book. I talk about how people can put you down and make you feel so bad about yourself.
Yes.
When people start asking you, why are you looking this way? Why do you look that way? Why is why your hair is not long enough? Why are you dark skinned? Why are you light skinned?
Get a wig.
That's right, but they're beating down their self-esteem. And women don't realize that, and so they start questioning themselves and say, maybe I need to lose weight. Maybe I need to gain weight or whatever, but you got to love yourself no matter what you look like.
That's very, very true. And I've noticed our children today are growing up in the same way. Children get very nervous when they're in violence, and they eat and they eat and they eat.
That's right.
We have very obese children because there's a lot of stuff going on in the home that people don't know about.
Right, and that's true, you know, and I talk a little bit about that too in my book. And I think that it's important that we as parents pay attention, because we don't know why all of a sudden the children start acting out in school. It could be because there is abuse going on within the home, and the teachers need to be aware of that.
But we need to get to the teenage girls.
Yes,
Let's talk
I
about
agree.
the teenagers.